2024 at 5:35 p.m. This is a meeting of the Communication and Policy Committee of the Concord School Board. With me are fellow committee members Jim Richards and Liz Boucher and Barb Higgins. Also with us is Kathleen Murphy, Superintendent, and Karen Fisher-Anderson with a very long title, Title IX Coordinator, and some other things. Tonight we have a very short agenda, but I would like to put it to the group if they would like to add anything to the agenda. Right now we have up for discussion policy number 430, which is the Restraint and Seclusion draft that we looked at the last time we met, but the last time we met was in February, which was before budget, and also I'm sure our brains have been full up with all kinds of things since then. So if there's anything we want to discuss tonight, I can add it to the agenda. I know that we had also previously talked about maybe the financial policies, the 300s that are coming up. I don't know if you guys wanted to put that on the list, and if we wanted to set aside some time to talk about the document retention and formatting stuff that we had workshopped at the previous meeting. So with that, does anybody have any additions or changes to the agenda?
As long as those are included.
All right. We'll save some time for just an open discussion
Okay.
at the end. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. With that, I will turn it over. It looked like Kathleen, did you want to say something?
Well, we kept it short tonight because restraint and seclusion is such a complex policy that we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time, even though this is like your second round with it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the reasons. And we are very close to having all of the 300s done and ready to go. We're just not quite ready. We had, after we finished them in our office, then they went to Jack and to Maureen for their review in the finance department, and included Ellen too because of the federal stuff. So, but we'll be ready for that piece, I think, next time. And we've been working on a couple of other policies. One is around the food pricing and how that's handled. We also have one that we're working on, and Karen and I went back and forth on, and that was the we must provide a space for staff whose mothers nurse their children so that they have an appropriate place for that. So we worked on that one. We went back and forth on it, so we still have some work to do on that. So we do have some coming up.
Okay. I did notice that one in the board folder.
Yeah, we put it in there, but I really struggled with the policy and some of the language. So I wanted to take a little bit more time with it before we went public with it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so the last time we met, we talked and saw a first draft of the changes of the restraint and seclusion policy. John Fabrizio was here, and also Barb offered some really great insight as to why the language needed updating, and why the language said what it said. We had provided a list of changes that we had asked for from Karen. What you see is the latest version in front of you. It was also in your board folder. Does anybody have any questions about the current draft before I turn it over to Karen? Excellent. All right. Why don't you take it away, Fran?
Okay, okie doke. And before I jump in on that, I want to make sure we all have the same things in front of us. One, you do have the most current policy, and I keep minutes, kind of to-dos, and so I'll go over the specific requests from the last meeting that you all wanted me to make the changes on and show you that those have been accomplished. Also in front of you, you have the forms that we alluded to last meeting, which was on the 15th of February with regard to the reporting forms that are required for both the Department of Education. Certainly, that's attachment A, and that's very relevant to us. You also have the definitions as they are referred to in both of these reporting forms and they follow this statute, which is 126U. And then you have, just so you can see it, the second one that came out is the Department of Health and Human Services Restraint and Seclusion reporting form, which we're really not subject to because we're not a facility. Obviously, we're educators, so education. And then for you, I wanted you to have the complete 126U because this particular policy is very statutorily driven. So, Cara, one of the questions you had asked me to look at last time was within the provision that talked about having to check students who are in seclusion, I believe it is, and we had the time frame of 15 minutes and 30 minutes, and you had said, is that just a best practice, or is that driven by statute? It is driven by statute. It's under 126U11, just so I can answer that one. Additionally, in the last meeting, we agreed that we would add that child, the definition of child, the definition of parent, a definition of serious injury would stay in our definition section, and so that has, those are in there. We removed the reference to medical restraint because we don't use that in any of our schools as far as medication goes. I replaced on page, the section dealing with mechanical restraint during transport of a child. There was a request under K, it's paragraph K 1, where we changed it to, it was case-specific circumstances, and you wanted it to be child-specific, so that change was made. We removed the hypothetical example pertaining to seclusion that had come out from DOE, because we didn't want to put that in there. Under the last section of the policy, which is in yellow, and the reason it's still in yellow is that is new, all new because it's red, but it's also yellow because even though it is not required within the statute itself, many of the requirements that are outlined under O are expected to like record keeping and what kinds of processes and procedures you have to follow. Kathleen and I talked about it, and ultimately she thought, let's be as transparent as we can so people know what the requirement is. And so that language has been put in there, and you all had asked for it to be made very clear that if the superintendent is not the one doing the investigation, that she has to approve any specific extensions of time. So that is that was added under section P on page 9, and it's in the paragraph starting with "in most cases," which is number 2 paragraph. And then we tried to make sure, and then on the last page, the citations on the revision date. The policy was adopted initially, it was adopted, in August of 2018, and then initially revised in December of, no, that doesn't work, 08, and then it had to have been revised.
not
See it again, it had to be 08, yeah, because then 10, 14, 18, and then again, when we finish it here and it goes to the full board, we'll add that. So those were the corrections you had specifically asked for, so we did that. I then went back, and I know you all really liked Merrimack's formatting and everything else, so we spent a lot of time trying to make it look consistent, and the way it works out is if a paragraph starts with a letter, then the subparagraphs are numbers, and then vice versa. If it's a number, it's a letter. So trying to be very consistent so it follows
that makes
stylistically.
sense. Right.
Yep.
Right.
So that's where we are.
Lots and lots and lots of work for what should be common sense.
Yes. Yep.
Would you like to walk through any sections so that they're all clear to you? How would you, I mean, those are all the changes, obviously, I was not here for that meeting, but all the changes that were made, do you want to walk through each section to make sure that it meets your expectation and in terms of all the formatting and as well as the language? I mean, obviously, the content is really important to us. We're going to require some training. We'll once this is approved, although the principals have seen it, we will go back. We talked about it today. I'll have to put in some training and review of this, especially as you have new staff, so people really understand all of it and the reporting requirements. So we report anyway, right? At the end of the year, I have to report all the restraints and seclusion to the Department of Ed from each school.
I would say, yes, we should go through it. I will say, haven't had a lot of time to look at this, so I apologize. But in looking at the current draft from the February 15th draft, I feel like there are not only formatting changes, but language changes that we didn't necessarily discuss. And so I was having a hard time finding things in the new document. I'll give you an example. On the document we received on February 15th, we had a section called Training Required, with a significant paragraph under RSA 126U5, restraint, da-da-da-da-da-da. In this current draft, we now have a section called Training that says, before the beginning of each school year, the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services shall ensure that each building principal or their designee identify and train specific personnel. So it's just a single sentence.
Correct.
That has now, so I don't remember asking for a reduction of the language in the section on training, but perhaps we had that conversation and people can jog my memory. But when I see things like that pop out to me, it's not only are we shifting language in the document to accommodate the formatting, but now I feel like I need to deep dive on the entire document in order to make sense of what looks like to be substantive changes that we didn't necessarily discuss during the first round.
So one more time, Cara, what changes did you?
So let's say on page 3,
I got it.
Rome 2, training required. That begins with under RSA 126U5, Rome 2, restraint may only be used or implemented by trained school staff. RSA 126U5A, Rome 2 applies the same limitation to the use of seclusion. The superintendent shall ensure that each building principal or their designee train appropriate staff in the use of physical restraint and seclusion techniques. It goes on. When looking for that language in the latest draft, on page 5, Pren H, under training, it now says, before the beginning of each school year, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services shall ensure that each building principal or their designee identify and train specific personnel in the use of physical restraint and seclusion procedures and the requirements of this policy. To me, that is different enough that it begs the question, am I just not seeing the language? Did we ask for a language change? We've taken the superintendent's duty out and put the assistant superintendent's duty in.
Right,
This is just
'cause-
an example of some of the things I spotted in this particular draft. So I do think it will require going through it
I think
again.
we should go through it.
With new eyes, but also with the question, why are these changes
Right, it
made?
made sense when I saw it, and again, I wasn't here the last meeting, so I apologize for
Right, and that's the
that.
thing, like, if
But it made sense that our
have a
assistant
physical copy
superintendent
of
for
it.
I do.
student
I
services
do.
do that, because that's part of in his realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I thought it was appropriate that we
Right.
do that.
that's excellent, and that's, I
And
just need.
I do have that example, and I can tell you that you all were very smitten, you really liked Merrimack's. So ours reflects Merrimack's, except for Merrimack has a couple of errors in there, which I recorded. So the only thing that came out of it is the citation to the RSAs. And because the fact that John Fabrizio owns the student services and works with all the special ed directors, assistant directors, he's the one that's going to determine with them who needs the training. And then we had that conversation about whether or not it should be CPI and whether we should list the specific training, and it was decided, John said no, don't.
Because trainings can change.
Right, and that's fair,
So-
but it's a reduction in language and also a shift in duty. It's just an example.
Okay.
So let's just walk through it, each paragraph. I will feel better if you do that
Okay.
anyway.
All right, let's start.
I
at
don't
the
have a
beginning.
copy of the old one.
Oh, I
You
brought-
mean the 15 February one?
Yes.
I have it, but it's all written on based on the comments that were made. I can run up and make a copy of it,
Does
or
every-
we
did
can just
everyone
go
else
through
remember
it.
I just
those
brought
good.
my old one.
Yeah.
I don't have it, I have the,
Barb, if you wanna look
I have
at
the policy that's
Well, I have my
currently in
computer, but I couldn't
place.
find it on
so.
here.
Is this the old one?
I don't know, Kathleen. I just have
I
the
can't
one
see
that
that.
It's
I
not dated.
from the 15th that made hard changes. So if you would like it, I mean, we
Well,
can
no,
just.
you need to refer from it.
Well, I don't know what else. I think we should just
I'll
go
listen.
through it. No, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, because we can just walk through it paragraph by paragraph, and you can tell me
This is not it. This is not it.
how you want to do it. That's fine. looking at the first sentence, again, this is our purpose. The other thing I tried to do is leave as much of the original language from the existing instruction or policy that we have, with, not changing it just for change's sake, but if there wasn't some change to it. So that is the objective. And we, in addition to that, the safety and dignity of the children, this language was new, that's in red, by limiting and regulating the use of restraint and seclusion to, crisis or to crisis responses only. Then we went ahead and outlined the description section, and did it. The red is we did decide to go ahead and define child, because, as you know, the law has changed with regard to special education, that kids can now stay in school until they achieve their 22nd birthday. And again, this is the definition that comes out of the statute. It's included in a section U1 under 126, so define child. Parent, we've had some issues with regard to parent and legal guardian, and then step parent, and so we had discussed that and decided we wanted to define parent because for purposes of special education, restraint, seclusion, it's either parent or guardian, legal guardian. It doesn't include a step parent. So we defined that. We went ahead too and put them all in quotes. I think that was the request.
Does guardian
slow
encompass
down.
step parent?
No. A step parent can, a legal guardian, believe it or not, no, it does not. So, but the law in, I'm trying to think which one it was. There is one law, and I can't, whether it's under education or whatever, that references step parent. But a step parent is it's a matrimonial thing,
Right,
but they
it's
haven't
close.
adopted the child.
Right.
Whereas, the other two are more recognized.
Yeah.
So
Just
that's
curious.
that's why we decided to make sure it was clear that for parenting purposes under this one, we mean a parent or a legal guardian.
Got it.
Okay?
Can I actually ask a quick technical question? I did notice in this particular draft, you've cited the RSA or the educational rules that are associated with each section. So for instance, A, definitions, now has RSA 126U1.
Yep.
Is that just for following along in the draft? Will those come out? Or is your recommendation that we add citations to the headers?
My recommendation is you add them, and again, that was one of the things you guys said you liked in Merrimack's.
I mean,
And it's very, as I said, it's very specifically.
right, I think we liked the format of
Yeah,
the
not
Merrimack.
necessarily their policy.
Okay, so you don't want the RSAs listed so they can go right to them in the statute.
Let's leave it up for discussion. It's just
Okay.
new, so I was asking, is this just for us to follow along, or is it your recommendation that they be added to the final
Yeah.
draft?
Okay. My recommendation is you add them, makes it really transparent as to where they are. Because as I said, it's a very, very long statute, and it takes you right to that particular section. So I'll put that down as a question.
Yeah, I mean, and because it's a broader question, is this something you're recommending going forward as a formatting, like an internal citation?
You mean on every single policy?
Yeah, is this something we're gonna see moving forward? It's
Is
just
it
a
necessary to have to do that when you have in the final page of your document
Right.
all of the citations?
I would agree with Kathleen on this, but I'm totally up for having it up for discussion.
Okay.
Sorry, please continue.
Okay. Restraint, again, just the definition, right out of the statute. Mechanical restraint was new for this policy. It was not in our original one. And obviously, those only, that pertains mostly to transportation of the student. Physical restraint, again, defined new. And they had said normally physical restraint is prohibited, but if you're going from, say, and transitioning from one position to another, it is allowable in a very controlled circumstance. Restraint, then, and number 4, they will go ahead and include what restraint is not. Okay, so definitions of, calming, touching, holding, guiding, those kinds of things. So A, B, and C, which used to be 1, 2, 3, 4, the Roman numerals in the last draft are now, there's one where I used the numbers, so I went with the letters. Then you go to,
Karen,
C.
can I ask a question about that?
Go ahead.
About what is now paragraph C regarding physical devices.
Yep.
We have physical devices such as orthopedically prescribed appliances, and then we have stricken surgical dressings and bandages.
Right.
In the previous draft, that was not stricken, so I'm curious about that. And then it continues, in support of body bands or other physical holding when necessary for routine physical examinations and tests, strike or stop strike for orthopedic, and then surgical. In the previous draft, orthopedic was stricken. So it looks like in this particular draft, we've taken out surgical dressings and bandages, but re-included orthopedic and similar devices. Was there a motivation for that change?
Yes. Because we decided to take out any kind of medical restraint, and so these pertain to, we have occupational therapists, OTs, and people like that who work with some of our kids who do have orthopedic prescribed appliances, but surgical dressings and bandages seem to apply more towards the medication type restraint or something like that. It didn't seem to apply when we took out medication.
Got it. Okay.
Supportive body bands, again, more of the orthopedic stuff that's going on. Physical examination tests for orthopedic, again, I left that in. Now, examinations and tests, I know sometimes they will do those for kids. I don't know, Barb, maybe for like Karen Baxter, our person there, may work with those. We can go back and look. I don't know, that's not exactly my lane, but again, examination and test didn't seem to be as much. Orthopedic, again, was consistent with the OT things, and then surgical, again, I took out because it had to do more like with medical. So, and then similar medical treatment purposes were used to provide support for functional body position or proper balance. Again, I made a call for OT. We took out initially for falling out of bed because we don't have our kids in beds. Again, that's that facility one.
Right.
Or to allow them to participate. So those were supposed to be consistent with taking out the medical
Got
piece.
it. Thank you.
Yep. Are you all okay with that as far as what's there now, or do you want to modify any of that language as far as anything, let's see, physical holding?
I would say on that particular point, if John Fabrizio has the opportunity to read it, and if he has sign off on it, then, I certainly don't have expertise in this matter, so I would look to him.
Did.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, the safety belt's pretty self-explanatory. I did change student to child because we changed child all the way through because of that definition. On number E, again, I think himself or herself, we were asked a while ago just to make sure we were consistent on our pronouns. They were not to use himself or herself, but themself. Let's see, she or he is now they. Serious injury, again, is defined in the statute and in the definitions that you have. Same with seclusion. Just the red language is the addition to what was already in our existing policy. Number 7 is very new. It's one of the newer parts of this, and that's that requirement about if you do use seclusion, you have to have the co-regulator to monitor the child. And it's your time frames between the 30-minute checks, and then how a co-regulator is chosen. That comes right out of the statute. I don't believe there's any change to that language from the last time. Intentional physical contact, that's pretty old language. That was it. It's not pretty old. It is in our current policy. I just went ahead and highlighted it, put the asterisks around it.
Can I ask just that the bullet points in 7 be turned into letters?
You do want them letters? Okay. A through D. A, B, C, and D. Okay. Then 8, the intentional physical contact. Again, all spelled out. You can see, if there's action taken. Again, I'm just going to look through and see if there are any changes to that specific language. It's just defined.
Yeah, can we pause just real quick? Because I don't actually remember seeing intentional physical contact in the previous draft, so I'm just going to look for it here.
Yep. It's intentional physical contact is in our current policy.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's black, it's not red. It's in the existing policy as we have it right now. And again, I didn't strike it unless there was a change to it. So in our existing policy, I don't know, did you all get a copy of that for tonight? It is section intentional, let's see.
Yeah. It must have just been.
See required use of co-regulators.
Right. I think that particular definition might have been in our original, but I don't think it made it into the first draft of changes. But if it's an RSA defined term, I'm happy to have it. I just don't think it was part of our original draft.
Reporting and notification regarding intentional physical contact is what it's in our current one right now. It's here, I can pass it down on, we didn't number, I guess these weren't numbered originally. It's on like page 5 right here. Let me see, pass that down, that'd be great.
Oh, I have the original. Yeah,
You-
I
you
have
do
it.
have it,
Yeah,
okay.
mhm.
I'm
But it's
looking-
just,
It should be.
we have to
It
ask the
definitely-
question, if it wasn't in the first draft and it's back in the
Why was it
second,
taken out of
why
the
was it
first?
taken out? Did we have a discussion about it and it wasn't necessary, or was it just an oversight that we're happy to have?
I think it was my
Back
oversight, because I just had to retype everything. So I must have not put it in there, although it's such a big,
It's a big deal.
Well,
It's
this is
such
a
a big
tricky part of
section.
any policy, because there are times when if the kid's gonna run in front of a truck, you have to grab the child, right?
Right.
So then,
Right,
to
we
be,
had
so you
this
assaulted my
conversation.
child.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, we
okay.
talked about this.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't say, I could have just stood there and yelled at your child to stop, and then they didn't, and what would happen next?
Right.
Those can be high emotional experiences, so, so it's good that it's here.
Good.
Well, we've talked about that at one of our schools that's surrounded by very public streets, right? So that they have to be much more assertive in making sure that youngsters safe.
Right.
So they do intercede with physical contact to keep them from running out into the main
I'm
road.
trying to
Right.
see why it wouldn't have made it in though.
Yeah, I don't think that we disagree that it's in there now. I just don't see it before.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
guess,
so it must have just
like,
been,
I
not that
know
you have
that
enough words
I-
in front of your face on a
Yeah.
daily
No,
basis.
I know, no, I'm just,
Right.
Just if there was a
I know.
process that we could see the changes from each.
it's the
Document.
red. It's supposed to be, the new changes are in red.
Right.
They're all the new ones.
But to see them from each draft.
Right,
So
'cause
from
they're-
one thing has red, the next draft has red. I don't know which was actually in it, which one was not in it.
Right. Yeah, so the reason I spread out like this is because I always have each physical draft along the way so that I can cite them moving backward.
Okay.
And, I mean, that's the only way I know how to solve that issue.
Okay, well, okay, so 8
Right now.
will
Yeah,
stay,
sure that's-
for sure.
It's not.
Is there a better way for us to present it? I mean,
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do. We've been having conversations about document tracking,
Right.
using, contracted services to do so or software to do so. Obviously, that's an added expense. If we did it internally, we would just have to come up with a set of rules that everyone would have to follow. One way to do it is to essentially label each draft separately. So you have a draft and then you have a redraft. And the redraft incorporates the changes from the draft so that only the new changes are in red, or you choose a different color or a different symbol. So it's really just a matter of creating those rules and then following them. And without any rules in place, we're sort of faced with just having physical copies and running through them as we can.
And my concern is easily missing something too.
Right, exactly. So it's definitely an important and necessary conversation for us to have, particularly with policies like this, or even something small, like the nurse, on the wellness committee, the technical change that was required. If we have a process for, let's say, if we had left that definition out of intentional physical contact and it made it all the way to the board, who's never seen this policy before, and then they approve it, as long as we're comfortable with reinserting that definition, should we find it as like a technical error down the line.
Okay. So is there, so 8, are you happy with A through E? Or, let's see, nothing was changed in there from, I've got to look back at the, just the red is the new information. So, and then I went on to B, which is the limitation of use of restraint to emergencies only.
Actually, I'm sorry, before we go ahead, can you
Yeah.
actually show me in the original policy, what page is that on, that definition? Am I missing it?
When you say the original, which?
The original policy as adopted prior to this process.
Okay, 430, the last, you're
Yes.
talking about the last revision?
Yeah, or no, just the policy as it existed before we started tinkering with it.
Sure, I have it. I have mine.
You
so-
had mentioned that this definition was in the original policy, but
What we call the current one, yeah.
Can you show me where?
Yeah, I believe it is right here under. One second. Pages here. Okay. Intentional physical contact. Child's aggression, misconduct.
I have them in order in my binder too.
It's not numbered either, which says me.
Could you find it, Jen?
I'm looking, I've got, oh, I'm sorry. You're not talking to me, okay.
All I have is this.
I can't seem
Here
to
it is,
get
right here,
into the
under
stuff here.
reporting and notification requiring intentional physical contact. It's on page, it's under 7. Well, no, keep going down. I think it's because they didn't number these ones.
So reporting
It's
and
page
notification
5.
regarding intentional physical
Correct.
contact.
Yep.
Where is the definition?
Contact with a child which is incidental, whenever a school employee has intentional physical contact with a student which is incidental to a child's aggression, misconduct, or disruptive behavior, right? And then goes on from there, but not limited to, where is this coming? And then you go down to 3, so they combined it in the intentional physical contact.
So you just said this was from the original policy.
It is.
It is written differently than the original policy. It is not in red. So where did this language come from? And is this the language you are recommending?
Yes, this is the language that's recommended, and it came out of that paragraph on 5. If you look at 1 through 3, and you take a look at A, B, C, D, and E, it's broken down into those sections.
Does everyone who has the drafts in front of them see what I'm seeing? And do they have the same
Well, it's not the
concern?
same.
Right.
It's not the, I don't see it's
I
the same.
apologize, Barb. I know you don't have the copies.
I don't see that it's the same from the first one. So so you're saying the language has changed. I don't see it in the second or third
Right.
drafts
And
at
what
all.
I'm seeing from the original to the current draft
Yep.
is not the same language, but the language that is in the current draft is not reflected in red to show that it's different from the original language. So what I'm thinking is that it is possible that you lifted this definition from perhaps the Merrimack policy.
No. I'm seeing it
And
in,
then-
I'm seeing
it's
it
right
in an earlier draft here that,
Will you look up intentional physical contact in that policy?
Is that an earlier draft than what we
That-
started from here? Is that what you're saying?
this is a draft, see, I'm gonna confuse you guys even further, because I did edits on like February 8th before the last one, and then this is from the 6th. It's definitely
And
in
then
here
the
from the
red is the
edits on the
difference.
6th.
Right.
So,
So-
that's the problem.
Karen, this is word for word from the Merrimack policy. And then what you have reflected in red is what you have changed to their policy. So we're working from language from a different district, which
Hang
I'm
on.
not saying is.
Where are you seeing in Merrimack's intentional physical?
Number 7, intentional physical contact means contact by a school employee with a child in response to a child's aggression, misconduct, and disruptive behavior.
That's the same language that shows up in page 8 of ours.
That is what I'm saying.
In
But it
our
doesn't show up in
original,
the February
in our
8th
original.
draft.
In our original.
Yeah,
Do I
in other
have the
words,
wrong
the
original then?
existing policy that is currently in existence right now shows that same language under reporting and notification regarding.
Read
It's-
it. Read it to me.
Whenever
Read
school-
where it says intentional physical contact means contact by a school employee with a child in response to a child's aggression, misconduct, or disruptive behavior.
Yeah, it doesn't, you're right, it's not word for word, but it says whenever a school employee has intentional physical contact with a student which is in response to a student's aggression, misconduct, or disruptive behavior, then the notification procedure, so that's.
Correct. Which has numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
Merrimack's has paragraphs A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
Our current draft now has paragraphs A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
This language is from Merrimack's policy.
Some of it is, but not all of it. Some of it is a recap of what we had in our original. Guys, last time I was here, if we go back and read the tape, you sat in here and you said, we like Merrimack, we like their format. You said the Roman numerals were messy, you said the formatting was off, and you didn't like it. And so I want to give you all what you want, but I don't know what you want.
I will be very explicit in what I want. It's what I've been asking for a while now, which is that we be consistent
Okay,
with our draft changes. If a language in an original policy changes, it has to be shown the same way every time. Language being removed needs to be stricken. Language added needs to be noted in track changes or in red. Adding language from a totally separate policy
Yep.
is not one of the things I ever intended for us to be working from. All it does is add confusion and piles of paper. We're trying to solve a mystery. I, at this point, would rather you repeal and replace. Do you understand what, where you just strike the entire policy and start from scratch so that I can run my own comparisons? I feel like this is very clear. Things should be formatted the same way every time. The paragraphs should have the same subparagraphs and subparagraphs every time. Anytime language changes, we have to be able to visually note those changes, or else we cannot take it to the board for approval. I cannot ask a board member who cannot see any of the changes to approve those changes.
I understand that, and I think probably the part of the problem is we've decided that, we started with the draft that came down from New Hampshire School Board Association, and you felt that was too wordy, and you didn't like some of the changes, because that's where the initial changes came from.
I feel like you're not hearing me. I
Okay.
feel like you're placing a lot of the blame on our decisions to
No,
make the
absol-
language shorter, more efficient, cite correct citations, correctly cite within the document where things need to be. I mean, those are not why these are confusing.
Right. I get it.
Yeah. So I clearly have that marked up as number 8, and it needs to be in red. It needs to show that there were changes made to that paragraph, as well as the supporting A, B, C, D, and E, because it doesn't show that. Am I right?
You are correct.
We need to do that, all right? We'll
And-
take care of that, and we'll make that change.
Thank
all
you.
right?
Okay.
I think I have it all for number 8.
But I think going forward, we need to work to solve the issue of the red and
Right,
the
right.
drafting, because that's
Right.
really where it comes
Right.
back to. I don't see it's necessarily in changing the words, it's that we don't know what
You
is
don't know,
new.
no, I know, I hear you, that's why I said that should have been in red, because there were changes made from the original document, even through the changes that you made last time, so we'll make sure that gets changed. I did not know that, I missed it, I assumed that it was just information that we had, and so I also missed it, so, okay. Can we go on?
Yes.
Are you guys good?
Okay.
B, the limitation on use of restraint to emergencies only. Again, pretty much standard language comes right out of the RSA. Number 5, there obviously was one word changed, obviously there. And then number 2, very clear that it can never be used explicitly or implicitly as punishment for the behavior of a child. Okay. And then C, as I said, it's all outlined. I guess, again, schools are limited to physical restraint, and again, that's taken right out of the statute. And that was new language. That's why, again, it's in there, and any mechanical use of the line in there about mechanical restraint was repetitive with transportation of students. That's why it was struck there, because it shows up later in the policy. The authorization and monitoring of extended restraint is, again, U11, that's where it's in there, has to be, people have to be trained, they have to report to their supervisory personnel, and then, again, do the assessments. That's outlined in 126U7 of the statute. It's pretty much word for word. Any prohibition of dangerous restraint techniques. Any questions on the one before I move on D? On the authorization and monitoring changes or anything? Nope, okay. Then prohibition of dangerous restraint techniques. Again, number 4, a lot of that is repetitive. It is currently in our existing policy about, A through E. All the way down. Number 5 is new. And the monitoring that you have to do in case, anything is abnormal, such as the color, the vomiting, the choking. That was an addition. Okay. Seclusion under F, the limitation on the use of it, again, can't be used for punishment or discipline. It's supposed to just be used when there's imminent risk of physical harm. The black is in the, again, was in the current existing policy. And then they go down and under RSA 126G, where we talk about the conditions of seclusion, again, all mostly new language. Talking, as you can see, it's outlined about the room size has to be appropriate. We can't, for chronological development, age, size, and behavior of the child, height of ceiling. You have to have the same cooling, ventilation, heating as you do in other rooms in the building, free from any objects that are dangerous. You have to have locks, but they can't, you have to have doors, but they, no locking. And then again, under E, the 4 things that include an emergency but not limited to, you have to be able to, that's why you have to be able to you can't lock the door and have to be able to provide that emergency. And again, you have unbreakable observation windows, that's a new requirement. Monitored, and people who are monitoring, obviously directly, continuously, visually, auditorily, they have to be trained. So those are the conditions under seclusion. Training, we talked about a little bit. It did switch over to the assistant superintendent, because that's John's duty. I talks about the notice and reporting requirements. Again, mostly taken, and the KFA down below under 1 was a note to myself, my apologies. I put that there to remind you guys of something, and we struck it, but I left my initial.
That was the one you were talking about, Jim.
Yep, yep.
I missed it too.
So these are the notification requirements to parents in the event that seclusion or restraint has been used, the timeframes, okay, whichever is the quickest, whether it's calling them or emailing them or whatever, you have to do it by the time you return them, that you're supposed to return before you return the child to the parent at the end of that day. So, then the written report, pretty much the same as what's in the existing on page 6 on number 2 all the way A through M. Again, 3, then you have to go on and do the superintendent notification within the 2 business days. That you then send that on to the parent, that is, or the guardian ad litem, if there is one appointed by the court. Number 4, again.
I'm sorry, can we just pause just very quickly?
Sure.
I mean, it's the same thing you were saying before.
Are you
Is that what
talking, are you talking about number 2?
I'm talking about number 2, because it's not in red.
Right.
I'm not saying it's the same as
Right.
the other.
So 2 is also, I think Liz and I are both searching for,
2 on page 6?
yeah, number 2 on page 6.
Yep.
Does it exist in the first draft? I don't think so.
No.
Does it exist in the original policy? I don't think
No.
so.
Yeah, it's
So-
under, it's written report to the superintendent on page 4, the bottom.
But it's not the same verbiage, the wordage,
Really?
that list, that A through M.
It says the date, time, I have it right here on the,
It does have date, time, and incident. It does have a brief description of actions. It does have the names of the individuals, a brief description of injuries.
no, it's this one. This is the one, 1 through 6. If you start, it goes on to the other page. They're the
What?
same ones. We just made them A through, because we used 2 for formatting, we did the letters. You
It's
seeing
on
it?
this.
Is that the original?
This is the original.
Yeah.
Written
So
report
date,
to
time, and duration, date, time,
superintendent.
and duration.
Yeah.
Description of the
I
actions,
see.
description of the actions, they're the same.
Okay.
Description of
is,
any
just
other
not on the
relevant
other.
events. A description of any other relevant events.
So, but then that
names of
confuses
them.
me too, because if it's not on the 2nd and 3rd draft, then this is new for the 4th draft, where it's just now coming back
Third-
around from the
third
first,
draft.
third draft, just coming back around from the first one.
Hang on.
That's why I can't follow it, because it looks almost brand new to me, because now I've been trying to follow with each draft. So even if it was in the first one, we
It-
didn't review it in the 11-15 draft.
In the, Oh, 11:15.
There was
The
11:15
2:11.
draft,
There's
and then
the,
there was a 2:08
yep.
edits made.
I'm looking 2:15.
So 2:15 is the meeting, 2:08 is when it was probably posted to the board
Yes.
folder. The one you have previous to that is, I would not even consider that a draft. That was just something like, that was workshopping. The
From
first,
this.
the first time it was introduced in committee was in February.
Right,
So,
Oh, okay.
2:15
So
was
we
the
looked
first
at
time.
this is what it was introduced.
yeah, so
Okay.
I think that if you had access to something prior to the year, it was probably like a first pre-draft, like as a, here's a preview of
Got
what
it.
might be coming, but
Got
we
it.
didn't actually hear it as a group.
Well, it looks pretty
Remember,
similar
we gave it to you
2:08.
just
Yeah.
as try to prepare you
Right.
for that. to
So I would
begin-
say, let's
yeah.
consider that a
Yeah.
what I would call a
Okay.
pre-draft, which
Right.
isn't really a
Right.
working draft for,
So then
purposes of
this
committee
is
work.
our first draft.
so I would say February 15th
Yep.
is considered our first draft. We have our original, our first draft, this is our second draft.
Got it.
And I'm just trying to find out what our current draft, our second drafts, number 2, A through M. I understand that it's similar to our original, but what language is it similar to that we reviewed as part of our first draft? That's what I was trying to take a beat to figure out what is comparable, because that's what we had the substantive conversation about, is what was
Right.
in the first draft. So I just want to make sure that this language is consistent with what we discussed the first time around. I just am not sure what section.
In terms of A through M, is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Just, if it was A through M, or 1 through 13 as it used to be numbered, which is now A through M.
Right.
If it didn't make it to the first draft, like if the changes from the original to the first draft did not include them, I have to assume they were not included for a reason, right? That they were either abbreviated, combined, obsolete pieces of language were taken out, it was reviewed by several people, and now it's back, and so I just want to make sure that we're not just breezing past it as a technical addition. If there are substantive issues with it that we need to maybe bring John back for, or to make sure that someone else has reviewed it and said, no, this isn't obsolete, this is relevant, we do want to use it moving forward.
Yep.
So I'm just trying
This
to,
is what we use in the, when I get those reports.
Mm-hmm.
This is the data, it's a lengthy report
Mm-hmm.
that I get from the administrator who's submitting it. Sometimes the principal, sometimes the assistant or the director of special ed, but with the folks that are involved in it, signatures. So this is exactly what I see.
so notice, so in the first draft, would it be similar to written description of physical contact? Date and time of incident, brief description of actions, name of individuals, and a brief description of injuries?
That's the only section I can think that it
That's-
was abbreviated.
So it's been added on to, Karen. From
I
the-
didn't add on to it, I took it, it's the older one.
Well, the thing
It's your
is,
report.
as we reviewed the February 8th is what I'll refer to it as, the February 8th draft, it should have been
And-
Xed out or struck through as being removed, so that we would have reviewed it at that point. I don't see it here in that one. Now it is being unstruck out and reintroduced, which would be another discussion we should have.
Correct.
As to, both of those should have been discussions we had, because we were looking at it and saying, oh, well, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Why don't I have 6, 7, 8, 9?
Yeah,
But now I'm looking at it and saying, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and I have a whole lot of addition here. Now you're telling me it's not addition because it was in our current policy, but from what we reviewed and discussed at length, it
Right.
is a change. And it causes us to
Oh, I
rethink
yeah, I totally
and
get it.
re-question all of those items, because if they were good enough to take out before, why do they need to have to go back in now? And so
agree.
that's my question, is like, do we have an answer for all those things, as well as a few of the other changes that
right,
got
right.
made?
The notification or the written report to the superintendent it's consistent with what's in our existing policy, okay? my apologies, I can't tell you, why it's not in, it's in here, it's in the current one. I do not know why it's not in your February 15th version. It does show up in other versions I'm seeing, and I think this is part of the problem. I'm just, honestly, I'm trying to do too much.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got too many versions going.
I think I would ask that maybe it's time to table this discussion until we have a clear draft
Yep.
and a clear intention for what the district would like us to review and approve. Because right now I am not clear on what the district would like us to review and approve.
Might I suggest that we take the current policy and start with that? And then you make the changes that you want in red and bring that one back to us to look at. So we're kind of starting from square one, because right now square two has me totally confused as far as what's in and what's out. So I'd rather just start over
And the good,
personally.
what we need to remember too is we've had unbelievably helpful, informative discussions on all of this.
Yes.
So it's not like we're starting over from where we were before. We're gonna look at things and go, oh, we discussed this.
Correct.
But- And it will, and in your 55,000 pages, it will exist somewhere, but this is a lot on you with a million other responsibilities.
No, that's fine, that's.
But I think so
appreciate
too, I
you
just
telling
think
us,
we
but-
need to, okay, we all have the blue one.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the green one, you know, and then we're just all on the same
Right.
page.
Even, I mean, to your point, even to add colored, like if it's light blue paper, light green paper, like what, I know that's not
No, actually.
accessible
Actually.
necessarily, but
I've been
that
on more
would,
than one special ed team where we had colored papers for certain things.
Yeah.
Well,
And
Yeah,
the
that'd
pink
be
copy was
easier.
the first one and the
That
blue
would
copy
actually
was
be
the second
easier.
one.
It
Probably.
would not be bad if
Yeah.
we had, this is the current policy. This is what was included in February, this is what we recommend, so at least I can look down and compare our progression, if lack of a
Because we can
better
take what we've done and say, okay, this can stay the same, nope, this gets changed. So we sort of have it. Yeah, that would be good, I think.
Yeah,
I'm jumping around screens and it's really hard
Right.
to.
yeah. Okay, on the guidance on substance I get, and I'll go back to our original one, and I'll just add in, I'll make sure that the new red is anything that's different, okay? Change a word or whatever else, again, I'll go back to the original one. Are you good with the format, though? Do you want me to put in the RSAs? Do you not like them? Do you like the letters and the numbers, or the numbers and the letters? That's what I just want to give you what you want.
Having spent a lot of years in special ed, I'm just a firm believer that if there's an RSA attached to a policy, the RSA is right there. Instead of a list on the back, that which one goes with which. So that's just my opinion. If I were having a conversation with a parent or my supervisor over an action that had happened or something, and I was the special ed teacher or the paraprofessional, whatever, I just think that's clear. This is a state law, a guideline, we have to follow it, and this is what it says, and this is how we utilize it.
For each section?
Yes.
Okay.
I just think a list on the back, okay, it's on there, it covers us, but it's not helpful. You know, like in terms of sitting around a table with a situation, it's right there.
But the question I would pose then is, as we go through each and every new policy with, a application towards, buses or whatever you want to do, if we're going to be adding an RSA, pertinent RSA to the paragraph head, I would ask us to be consistent from one policy to the next policy to the next policy.
So
I don't like-
does
I
that
don't-
create,
I don't like jumping around.
No, I
Does that
understand.
create too much work?
well, I just think when it comes to putting your hands on a child, I just think this is a policy that carries a lot more weight than,
That this would
permission
be-
slips for a field trip. Do you know what I mean? Like,
What you're saying is that this is not gonna be the overall format, but because of this importance.
I'm saying I haven't
this
considered it for other
particular
policies,
policy,
but for
because
this
of
one, it makes,
particular-
right.
Yeah.
And I just speak from having sat on at many tables that are referring to these based on a million things with children, but touching a child,
Now, I see your point,
Yeah.
because this is a policy, I'm looking at it from a parent
right,
point of view.
right.
And, I know from our experience on this board that this is a policy that gets a lot of use and scrutiny, and the more easier we can make it for parents, the better.
Right.
off, and I would agree that maybe a permission slip policy doesn't need this RSA thing, except at the end, where we have policies, you know, you referred to or something at the end.
Do you
I get
think,
that.
do you think sometimes because it's longer, more, I think the longer ones sometimes, because you're going to specific sections, maybe that may be a reason to put them in on some of them. Because I can tell you with the new Title IX, it's going to be very long, and you can go to a certain section and be able to go right to the RSA. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, it's just, ease of,
Yep.
you know,
Well, and I think visually,
understanding
to your point, Barb, somebody reading this policy who may not know that it's bound by law
Right.
will be visually informed.
Right, exactly,
by
right there.
that
Not like, okay,
citation.
now turn to the back, go
Right.
down, see this one here, this is, applies to
Right.
this. Well,
I would caution against taking it down to like the paragraph level. I might suggest we just keep it to the section, you
The
know,
section level?
126U or whatever 126U1, but not any.
Oh, yeah, that makes
Like
sense.
not Rome 2 or Cap
When
A
you're
or
on the
whatever
new
it's
s-
going to
The new
be.
set, the next thing, any applicable RSAs are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, yeah.
And then I would also, just my personal preference would be to not have it as part of the header itself, but maybe a subset of the header, so that it's not part of the.
Next to the title.
In a great world where we actually like get these online and they're like, you can find them through links online, then people want to be able to see the header and not necessarily see the citation. I would separate them, but other than that, I'm fine with having them in.
What do you mean by that? You just mean
So if you
So,
put.
like-
citation goes underneath.
Yeah, that it would just be.
126
Wouldn't go next to the title, it would go
semicolon
right-
1 would be on a line underneath it, and that, if we were really good, you could click on it and it would take you.
Right, exactly. So if we actually like had live links for these online, we wouldn't necessarily want part of the title of a header to be the citation. I have similar thoughts about our policies now say Concord School District Policy 430, paren required. So we understand what that means, but somebody who's just visiting our policies, to them, they're all required. So that to me is an internal communication that I would put either in a header, a footer, somewhere just not in the official title of the policy. That would be my preference.
Do you want it back under like the, because they're either priority required by law, recommended, or optional.
Right.
Those are the three. Do
Right.
you want me to just put them underneath, put it underneath legal references as to what the category is?
I'm fine with it being maybe anywhere other than what is the official
I
title.
like it up in
of
the top corner.
You like it
I've
up in the-
always done it.
Okay.
when
Yeah,
it's
I've
right
done
there.
Yeah,
What is that?
up in the top right.
Like having it like the
Required,
status of the
optional.
policy, if it's required, recommended, or
Oh, okay.
because we just started adding those in so that we could
I like
see what it's
optional
for.
policies.
But I think that having it as part of the official title might confuse a user who does
Oh, it shouldn't be.
part of the official title. So yes, in a header, just up in the corner would be wonderful.
Okay.
But I love the intent. It gives us a clear internal understanding of what we're working on.
Okay. And my apologies for all the different drafts. That's totally on me, trying to put them all together. It didn't work. So I will go back and make it right.
Thank you.
Just on a substitute, on an item with, I'll just bring it up, is in the paragraph where we need to retain records and the definition of retention, record keeping and retention.
What page are you on, Jim?
I'm trying to see, I have to come back to, because it was in a couple places.
Are you talking about the policy again?
I'm looking at,
Page 8?
yes. The only thing I
Oh, I
would
see,
have
yeah.
is
Yeah.
all reports, notification, and other records. It's included in this, but I would want to make sure that our administrators would realize that we now have video in many cases, and I would want that to be clearly retained, since video gets overwritten quite often, like after 90 days or 30 days or whatever. So that if something occurred in our school that has a video, like a hallway video or something, that record would be retained, and they would know they had to retain that, because I think it would be an important piece of information.
Yeah. So do we have a current policy on retaining video?
No, I bet it gets overwritten myself, because most places what it is it's on a hard drive. And it is very voluminous as far as, you know, how much space it takes. So typically, I would guess that we rewrite over top of that hard drive so that we probably have 30, 60, 90, 120 days. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's it's good for let's just say 60 days. And then that camera starts, or that, you know, area rewrites over the hard drive, so that it would be important to retain that information in a timely manner.
Right. I can tell you, transportation does the bus videos. They retain, if we call them and say we had an incident and they get to the video and they chop it, they'll keep those on. For disciplinary purposes, we may refer to videos, but unless we use them as part of a disciplinary process, or we turn them over, for example, let's say, for example, we have a sexual assault, and we just happen to have it on tape, and we make a report to Concord, we'll cut that video and we'll keep it and turn it over. But but like the normal videos that we keep, that we see in the hallway for like minor, you're right, I don't think we're keeping them.
No, you don't keep them, you would overwrite them, but if we,
What's our policy?
but we should be
We
able to
don't-
burn them, we should be able to burn them to a disk or a thumb drive or a external drive in one way or another.
Floppy disk.
Right.
Yeah, like an
How
old
about,
floppy.
how about this? I would recommend maybe by the time we meet next, can the district come to us with what they know of in terms of their own policy, internally or otherwise documented? If there are any confidential things we need to go non-public to discuss regarding retention of crime on video, and then maybe come to us with a recommendation for any language you would like to add to this particular policy.
I will clearly be talking to our district attorney around the retention of videos, especially as it relates to what's on that video. Other students, you know, there's a lot to those videos. It's not just one youngster who is in a restraint, and so I appreciate what you just said.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to be, I want to be prepared when we have a situation and someone says, I'm subpoenaing that video.
Well, that's the only way they can get it, is if they provide a subpoena to us, and then we can release it. But we don't release videos to anybody
No, I would not
without
expect
that.
so.
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's one of the things the legislature's looking at with restraint and seclusion, is make the requirement that
Well,
they be videoed.
They want people to be wearing video equipment
Right.
so that they can video that. That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But that's not on the law
not
yet.
on this one.
yeah, my concern is
You're
I
gonna have
don't
a
want
lot
us
of
to
problems
destroy
with that.
something that we should have retained and negligent in not retaining it, so,
It's an excellent point.
thank you.
To not know is, puts us in a risky position. So we'll look forward to that discussion when we come back. I think we've gone a little longer than we anticipated. Do we still want to have an open discussion about certain items? How's everybody feeling? Liz, you had brought something up that I did just want to mention, which is that we do have some questions, or Liz did, and I agree that of all the policies that need to get updated because of changes to law,
Yep.
is it time for us to just look at that list and prioritize what those are within, you know, if all of it is required, if all of it is timely, how are we prioritizing that list? So I'd love to have that discussion, just so we know what's coming. Obviously, so much of this is tied to your workload and what you guys can get done, so I don't necessarily want to tell you what policies need to happen,
We're
but
in pretty good shape with
Yeah.
required policies.
That's great.
I want you to know, we're anticipating and awaiting legislative changes, which we are around the corner by June.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see some ready to go July 1, but we have a period of time to develop those. But we're in very good shape. But I will bring a list of anything that's out there that's still a priority that we have to address.
okay,
I will
Thank
bring
you.
that, but it's a very small list.
good.
Couple of them I mentioned tonight, which was the nursing station for staff. We have one for students, we don't have one for staff. So, you know, we'll check it out.
Okay.
We don't have a lot.
And if we as board members would like to look at revising
absolutely, that's
Doesn't mean you don't have to
part
wait
of your,
for it to
yeah,
be in revision.
right.
Right. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm relatively new. Jim and Barb, you can provide perspective, but my experience in the last year or so has been, we receive your work to review, but I think to Liz's point, if we have things that we would like to work on, I think that is something we can also do.
This committee has done that in the past with other members. I think Jim could attest to that, that there were questions about field trips and other things that came up that we took a look at.
Yeah.
We have one on class size, that's not,
As we looked through policies, as we've gone through and looked at our policies, and you can just go into the website and actually go through it, anyone can bring up a policy that they think we should revisit or that we should look at and revise. You just add it. I would request some time from the chairperson and say, we'd like, can we fit this in and discuss it, and we should discuss it.
Okay, great.
And if you take a look at your matrix, that Excel spreadsheet, they are all labeled as to what their category is. So that'll tell you.
Well, and we do actually have, the direction of the board is that we revisit the committee's policy with, just to open up a discussion about whether or not we want to add a committee on safety specifically, or if it's something that belongs with capital facilities, or we just, it had come up in conversation with Matt Cashman about the fact that we have so many safety topics.
I actually thought
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
driving the car, but we look at our standing committees. I think what needs to happen is perhaps in the description of the responsibilities of our committees, each committee has a safety section, because the instructional committee, safety will mean something
Right.
quite different than communications and policy, which would be different than capital facilities. But I think if we initially look at how our committees address safety, based on what they're there for, we might not need to have an entire committee on safety, because it could be an ongoing piece of, am I making sense?
Yeah.
No, this is why we need to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think it would be great to have Matt back, just
Yeah.
to so that he could maybe bring up, he may be thinking of safety in such different ways
Correct.
than we're thinking of it.
Yeah.
And certainly in ways that maybe a committee could be helpful in some way, directing contracts or, whatever it might be.
Right.
So to get his perspective would be helpful. I personally don't think we're all stretched thin on time as it is to add another committee is we'd have to really need it, in my opinion, to make that happen, but bringing it to policy is the way to start that conversation, so,
Right.
And Cara, we were
Yeah.
also tasked with revisiting the class size
Size
policy.
policy.
yes. What was the motion? Do you remember? Is it just the
To
policy?
relook at the policy
To
with
just
regards
revisit?
to.
Okay.
Yeah, and make any suggestions that the committee felt were in the best interests of the district.
Okay.
There's
Would we
one
want to
other-
do that
Plus
with like a
size policy.
co-instructional
Yeah, plus size
committee
policy.
meeting? Would that be?
That might be a great idea, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Probably needs input from, at the very least, that committee, by far. That would be clearly
Yeah.
a critical committee to have input on.
Because certainly as part of the
Who else-
substantive.
Is anyone else here on instructional? Yeah. So Brenda, I don't know who else is on it. I don't have.
Well, so would we talk about it, or would you?
No, we should have a meeting with the instructional committee and us. I was just, sometimes there's two or three, sometimes two people are on the same
Right.
two committees.
Could we, Kathleen, look at the calendar maybe in May to talk about when we could do a co-meeting of
Yeah.
the policy
Yeah,
and
I just
instructional?
made that note.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
We also could address safety at that time too, have just an open conversation.
Perfect.
The only other thing that has come up that I will bring up now that we can decide whether we want to look at is, in the initial meeting, in the election of officers, we don't have a policy statement that says how the procedure goes. And we
Right, we
talked about it.
defaulted
and
to Robert's
we-
rules.
We went to Robert's rules, and we went to that particular method. But if this, and I don't know that we need to make any changes, but it came up, and we should make a decision or make a recommendation as to keep things exactly as they are, or make a change.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the things
we
that have
could
come up
even
over the
just-
last 6 months.
We could even just add that sentence that we defer to Robert's Rules of Order for
Simply as that, because we did have
committee elections.
fair discussion back and forth, which I thought was a healthy discussion back and forth, but if we can avoid that with like a simple sentence, that'd
Yep,
be perfect.
all right. Someone's taking notes, right? Okay. Then yes, I think that would be great to bring up. So I think those are all things that we can do, in partnership with policies that need to get done, right? They can happen.
Yeah, there's no
Side by
pressing
side.
time on some of those items.
Yep. Okay. The last time we were here, we talked about giving ourselves some homework assignments in terms of looking at other school districts.
My dog ate it.
Yeah, right. The budget process ate it. Because, we started talking about like, how do we want our policies to look? How should we retain them? And, the point was made excellently that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There is likely another district or someone that is doing it well, and we would like to follow it. So my notes, I had Nashua, and I was going to look at the state. Does
That's gonna
everybody?
do Pittsfield and Lebanon.
Okay. Does everybody? I have a piece of paper that says it. Hold on.
Wrote it all down.
You were going to look at Dover, and you were going to look at Merrimack and
Well, I already looked at Portsmouth.
Portsmouth. Okay.
Dover I pulled up. Lebanon is a good one too. And Merrimack. For the top ones.
Okay. I don't know if I have the energy to go into it today.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we talking from the way it looks, the formatting, the way?
Yeah, not the policies themselves.
Right,
How
so-
they're organized,
How
not
they're
the wording of the
drafted,
policy.
exactly.
But is it
So,
numbers
like,
and
I'm
letters or
talking
letters?
about-
Yeah.
Well, they're all letters. They're all the school board.
Right.
Which
Right.
I think eventually we should change it to that. I know that's a lot of work.
It's an
because-
endeavor. Yeah.
Because the way that it's formatted on the website is easy to track from one school to the next versus looking at ours, you have to look at numbers, then you have to look at the title.
Right, that was
of
the
it.
whole, right.
So that's
discussion.
something to consider is changing that policy code to this. to
Barb,
be-
why did they go to numbers? I've never
So
had
I
numbers.
reached out to.
I've never been on policy committees.
Yeah, I reached out to the school board association, and they essentially said that larger districts that are older started making substantive policies well before this coding system was in place.
Right, that would make sense.
But the vast majority of districts in the state use the letter coding, and it's like Concord, Nashua, maybe Manchester. They just have their own system because they just have so many.
Well, and Concord was the Concord Union School District, way before any of you guys.
Yeah.
And it was, Pennacook had a high school, but all surrounding towns could sort of decide where to go. So there was, Loudon came to Concord and Bow came to Concord, and there were all these different, so you had little communities that had sort of policies for their elementary schools, and then you had Concord that was like a sort of a melting pot. And so I would think Concord, when it all went to the SAUs and the numbers, my hunch is a lot of organization happened at that time that we wouldn't have taken part in.
And we already had. I think
Right.
we had the 100 series, 200 series, 300
Right.
series. That's very similar to the state in its
Right.
rules. So I think probably they had established that, and there were just so many policies already on the books that they're like, we're not changing. But
There
yes.
is a process. There's a very long spreadsheet with all of the categories that the letters are coded to. That if we really wanted to deep dive, we would essentially locate our policy, whatever number it is, and then we say this most relates to this letter coded policy as recommended by the School Board Association. It would be a
That is not my
task.
love
So
language.
policy 115 is now gonna be policy ACAA.
It's
Right.
it's already done for you. It's on your it's on your spreadsheet.
Sheet.
I
It's
already did it.
You already did that. So
Yeah.
we could change it to letters if we wanted to.
It's already, I'll say it.
If the district wanted to make the recommendation for recoding, yes. So, something to talk about, as well as what we view is, best practice for paragraphs, formatting, citations, document retentions, file naming. These are all things that create consistency and help everyone.
First reading, second review.
Right.
Review, revised date.
Right.
This one has every single time they've looked at it.
I've seen them that have adoption date, and the most recent update. Just those two. I've had ones that I've seen, a couple that were just like what you just showed, where it's like, okay, this was reviewed in Adopted in 72 and reviewed in, 79, 86, 91, and has all those things. I was looking at how they index them, because, for instance, Dover indexes it by title or by letter, by code. There isn't a search capability, though, to find
Right.
it, though. It's just literally a static document.
Just with ours,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it is the
would
same
be
with,
great
oh,
if
I know
ours
it's the
was
same with
searchable.
ours. I thought I was gonna challenge us to do it,
Yeah, well,
make it a little better, maybe.
sky's the limit, guys.
So, but yeah, no, I think we probably should do it at a later time, but I think it's
Yeah.
worth us just to
Yeah,
have
I
that
wanna-
discussion, because it was very interesting to go do the research.
Absolutely. Keep thinking about the research you've done. Do more research as it interests you, and then we can have a robust conversation. And maybe even, I love that Liz always holds up her computer with her favorite documents. Maybe we could print out some example documents that we can just be like, yes, this works for us. I did also ask the School Board Association if they themselves have a drafting manual, and they do not. That would have been the easiest to do. But so yeah, I think it's going to be probably looking to other districts that might look good to us. So I'm so tired. I'm forgetting my words. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Barbara Higgins,
Seconded,
seconded by Jim. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Any
The old
opposed?
people wanna go home.
I know, right? Put me to bed.
Well, you know what, though, this was, we don't,